Welcome back to the Pushing Through Loss podcast, where we share stories, honor resilience, and embrace strength. I am Kalila Green Siciliano, and it is my honor to begin the journey with you. Today I have with me somebody who I just met, but I feel connected to, Mama Jean. It is so wonderful to have you on today on Pushing Through Loss.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really glad we connected. I love the internet. I really do.
I know. I think since COVID, it's one of those few blessings that you're like, we can connect from anywhere. This is amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, we just connected and we had a chance to talk for a few minutes before we started recording. And I think that so many parts of you are so fascinating, starting with the fact that we're both homeschool moms. We both love to care for other people. We've had a different fertility journey, maybe not the same fertility journey, but something different than most people go through. And you ended up making that into your career to help other women. So I hope I got that all correct in a nutshell, but I'd love for you to expand on that.
I am amazed that you just said it so profoundly succinct. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes. Yes. So, my fertility journey, I was able to get pregnant right away when we got, married, and we thought we know what we're doing. And then we had 7 years of infertility. And that was a whole journey of what's wrong with my body. Why is my body not working? Um, and then, like my husband says, the plumbing just didn't work. And now all of a sudden it did. So I joke about my 7 years of fasting and my 7 years of feasting because
You got
then
like a
boom,
whole
boom,
Joseph
boom.
theme going
That's
on.
right. That's exactly right. Yeah, so then boom, boom, boom. And then our fifth one, I ended up miscarrying at 12 weeks. And that was a very devastating loss. And that's why I really wanted to connect with you. I was like, yes. I mean, she would have been 21 this year,
Wow.
and she's still part of us.
Right.
But again, the great thing about the old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Yes.
And so yeah, so in 2018 I became a Billings Ovulation Method instructor, and I worked at a pregnancy center. And I our protocol was anyone that had a negative pregnancy test, then they came to me.
Hmm.
And so I actually was starting to attract a lot of infertile couples.
Hmm.
And so when I left that and started my own company, Wisdom Wellness Coaching, that's kind of where I thought I was going to go. Um, I do marriage prep for the Catholic Church. That's kind of where I was leaning
Hmm.
towards. But lately, I've realized that there's so many women in the perimenopausal phase that need assistance in not just their cycle of like what's going on with my cycle, but also the emotional and mental aspects. So I'm now a Catholic mindset coach, a life coach,
Hmm.
and that's really where I lean into, is helping others process those strong emotions and those thoughts that we have. But more importantly, one of the things that I'm finding is that in that phase, a lot of memories, because we are ending our fertility, and we're looking back and seeing things that we might have regretted.
Hmm.
Maybe our world isn't ending the way we, or coming to fruition the way we thought it was.
Hmm.
Our kids aren't the people that we thought they were going to be, or our marriage isn't, or whatever. And so there's a lot of broken dreams, broken pieces, um, and some of it is miscarriages. And
Hmm.
I talked to women who hadn't ever really processed their miscarriage or any kind of infant loss. And it really, like I said, it comes out during this perimenopausal phase of and they're like, wait a minute, what's going on?
Right. I was actually just going to ask you about that because you had mentioned your daughter would have been 21, and because you're moving into this perimenopausal phase, I'm sure that even just for you alone to understand where those women are coming from, to not having processed a miscarriage when it happens, to then all of a sudden going through this phase where you're thinking, okay, I really am not going to be able to have kids anymore. All of those thoughts get brought up of, well, the what ifs come back and the guilt comes back and
Mhm.
the memories of exactly what happened are there. Can you tell me a little bit more? I know we talked a little bit about the miscarriage before we started recording. So can you tell a little bit more so my listeners can understand what you went through? Knowing, first of all, that your oldest was a teenager at that point, but even just the process, like you said, not knowing what to do and then coming at it now thinking, okay, is there anything that I wish I had done differently?
Yeah, thank you. That's such a powerful question. So, we were, pregnant with our fifth. We were so excited, and had gone to the midwife, had heard the baby's heartbeat. I was 12 weeks pregnant. And then I think it was either the next day or the day after, she called me at frantic and said, "We just got your blood work done and your thyroid is really, really low. You need to double up on your meds. You're going to lose the baby if you don't."
Hmm.
And and then the other part of that story also was she's like, I don't let your baby nurse, because I had a 2.5-year-old and I always nurse my children, till they're mid toddler age.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of hard to try to not let him, try to distract him in a way. And he's 23 now, and he's very intuitive. And so he knew things were going wrong. And so of course he wanted to
Interesting.
clutch, me, and he wanted to nurse. And I was like, yeah, that's going to bring on
Contractions,
contractions.
right?
And yeah, and so then the midwife sent us, and she said, "We're going to send you to a special ultrasound, an internal ultrasound, and if there is no heartbeat, they're not going to say anything to you. They're just going to send you back to my office."
Hmm.
And actually, it was really interesting. This just came up. I got in the car afterwards. My husband and I were both silent, going to the midwife, knowing already, and I can't think of the actual scripture verse, but the saying was, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Hmm.
And that was my consolation at that moment.
Hmm.
So we went, and then I didn't want to go to the hospital to get a DNC. For just my own personal take, I wanted to birth her.
Hmm.
And so I went home, and I started having contractions, and my husband decided. So my daughter was, let's see, she must have been 15 or 16 at the time. And then we had the three little ones.
Hmm.
And so he chose to take the three little ones out of the house so that they wouldn't experience it. And my daughter was supposed to, quote unquote, help me, but she didn't really, I mean, she didn't know, and I didn't really want to expose her. So
It's really just
yeah,
moral support at that point, like God forbid in case you need anything.
yeah, yeah. And so I started having contractions, and I did pass, and it literally was like a blob as she was in my hand, and I'm like looking at her, like I couldn't see ahead. I couldn't see, you know, because at 12 weeks, I know the developmental stages of a baby as a
Hmm.
fertility person, and it just wasn't. And I'm Catholic, so the first thing I did is I baptized her. We'd already named her Catherine Irene.
Oh, that's
We
beautiful.
name our children very early, and I just knew that it was going to be a girl, but I didn't know what to do, and that was the thing, because I was thinking, well, I need to get a box so we could bury her. I'm kind of envisioning like the kids will come home and we'll have this process, but there was nothing, and I was kind of freaking out. And so I literally just put her in the toilet and flushed her. Um, and then later, as because at 12 weeks you already have your placenta. So I literally was in labor. Um, and I called a girlfriend, and she kind of was praying with me. And anyway, I passed the placenta, and literally the bathroom was just a mess. And I remember just feeling like exhausted, like well, like this is all like I just had the biggest bowel movement, right? Like that,
I
but you're
mean,
just
that's kind of what
exhausted.
it
It is,
feels like.
yeah. And so then I went out to the TV room where my daughter was, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm okay." And I just rested, and my husband finally came home with the kids, and he went in the bathroom, and then he came out, and he was like, "Are you okay? Do we need to go to the hospital? Like, what happened in the bathroom?" And I was
It's
like, "Oh."
frightening.
I was like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't clean up." He's like, "No, no, no. There's a lot of blood in there." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I passed the placenta, honey, you know."
Right.
Um,
I mean, for all intents and purposes, you gave birth.
yes, yes. And I say that, I tell people that I've given birth to 6 children
Hmm.
and one is in heaven.
Hmm.
Um, and as I was telling you, the interesting thing was my son, he was 2.5 at the time, of course, he wanted to nurse, and
Hmm.
I finally just like, "Yeah, come on, nurse." Um, he always talks about, well, now at 23 he doesn't, but when he was a child, when I would introduce myself to people and I'd say I have 4, he would say, "No, mommy, we have 5. Baby Catherine's in heaven."
Aww.
And when I got pregnant with my last one, totally unexpected, because I thought I was done. I was 40 when I had the miscarriage. I was 42. We'd been trying for 2 years, and I was like, "Well, guess we're done." And got pregnant.
Surprise,
Our
surprise.
Yeah, well, our pattern is girl boy,
Hmm.
and so I took the kids for a 3D. This is back when 3D imagery was new.
Hmm.
And the gal said, "So, what do you think he's going to be?" And my little Joe goes, "Well, if we keep to our pattern, it'll be a boy." And
She's
she's
like
looking
counting,
at
like,
the
wait a
kids,
minute.
and she's like, "No, you mean a girl?" And he says, "No, baby Catherine is in heaven." And then she kind of looked, and she was a little bit felt awkward.
Hmm.
And I just turned her and said, "Oh, we had a miscarriage 2 years ago, and
Hmm.
we named her baby Catherine." But I think that's actually been the gift for us, is that we have a real connection with her.
Hmm.
We named her. She's in our family.
Hmm.
Um, there was grieving. There was serious grieving. That was in early December, and then in January we went to the pro-life march, and that just brought up. And I had huge guilt. As a Catholic, I went and talked to my priest about. I threw my baby away,
Right.
and he talked me through it, and but that emotion of like, "Oh my goodness, what did I do?"
Right.
And then, like I mentioned to you, the other powerful, compassionate understanding of, if a woman chooses to take the abortion pill, and has this abortion in her home, and she's not prepared.
Hmm.
Like, I had given birth,
Right.
so I knew what labor pains were, and everything. Um, I wasn't expecting all that blood. I mean, I knew I was passing the placenta, but I wasn't expecting all that blood.
Hmm.
So that could be so devastating. And I had such a heart for women who, made this choice, and maybe they didn't have anybody else,
Right.
like my husband. And and intuitively, like, I knew my husband made a good choice to not have the kids, but at the same time, there was a little bit of resentment that I was totally by myself, like, you
Hmm.
weren't there. Because he is a great, it's one of the reasons why I'm like, "Dude, we need to make lots of babies, because you're a great dad
No.
during labor." Yeah, he's just really in it. And our first baby, the labor and delivery nurse kept asking him, like, "Are you sure you've never helped? Like, you're a really great
Like he could be
coach."
a
Like,
doula.
yes, yes, he really, yeah, I mean, he just he's so in tune with me, and it's such a beautiful thing. And not having him there, I think, also was part of that grieving process of
Hmm.
having to go through alone. Um, and then the other kids, losing a baby sister. We haven't really talked about it. Like I said, my Joe, who's the closest, he's the one that talks about her all the time.
Hmm.
The others don't really talk about her.
Hmm. A
Um,
little bit farther removed.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But he was just so excited to be a big brother and to have a little sister,
Hmm.
and um, so yeah, it was just kind of an interesting, but the grace that has been given to me is that because of that, I have been able to, like I said, been able to create that space for women who have a desire to finally process
Right.
this experience. And I know when a woman comes to me, reaches out somehow, like, I know you're the one that I need to talk to. I
Hmm.
know you'll understand. And
Yep.
anytime I have a woman, either because of infertility or because of a miscarriage, or now through perimenopause and postmenopause, I'm actually postmenopausal, but I'm seeing all of this processing, and they're like, you understand.
Right.
And I think it's the it's the sadness of our society that we don't have this um woman sisterhood
Right.
to help us. Just a fun question for you. Have you ever read The Red Tent?
I have not, but somebody just asked me about it the other day. That's so
Oh
funny.
my goodness. That is the best book I've read. And we have the girlfriends of mine that are kind of on this same wavelength of understanding birthing and cycles and sex and babies and breastfeeding. We just look at each other and say, this is a red tent moment.
Oh,
Like
that's so
we
interesting.
yeah, because it's a historical fiction,
Right.
and the women, they all menstruated at the same time, and so that's what they did. They would stop the caravan and they would go into the red tent.
Hmm.
And the men are thinking they're suffering, but they're really telling stories and they're serving, and that's where the birth and all of it is just beautiful. And we don't have that here.
Right.
We don't have that in this society, which is why I was so excited to be on your podcast, because I think you're going to do so fantastic. You are speaking about things that need to be spoken about.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
agree. And
yeah.
I think that it's something as my listeners know, after I had my miscarriage, it was one of those where all of a sudden people came out of the woodwork and I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea what would happen, let alone what kind of feelings I would have in terms of the guilt and the spiraling of the what ifs and the feeling like I was going crazy. And the more I talk to people, the more normal it all seems and the more okay I felt because I know I'm not alone in what I went through. And I think that's the biggest part where in
Mhm.
birth, we talk about it so much. We love talking about life and it's easy and it's happy and it's joyful. But to talk about the other side of it where bad things happen and we can't just push it under the rug. We can't just ignore it and say it's going to go away because it doesn't go away. It's death is part of life.
Right. Yes, it's a double-edged sword, right?
Right.
And one of the things you said something that was really important. You said that you had never encountered another woman that had had a miscarriage.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, part of the problem also is that medically, statistically, 1 in 4 women or 1 in 4 pregnancies will end in miscarriage.
Yep. It used to be 1 in 4 women and it's gone up and now it's 1 in 4 pregnancies. That is a frightening statistic.
Yes, but because it's such a really high statistic, you talk to medical community and they kind of slough it off.
Right.
1 in 4, end in
It happens all the
pregnancy.
time.
Yes.
Right.
And it's like, wait, I'm the one that it happened to.
Right.
It's my body and it was my baby and it was my family that this affected.
Right.
And where is your support on what, and I even when we got pregnant with our son after the infertility, I was actually at a doctor's. They were going to do some biopsy stuff, and they had to do a pregnancy test. They're like, oh, you're pregnant. And I was just elated. I was
Mhm.
just so elated. And he said, now don't get too excited because, it could end in a miscarriage. And I looked at him straight in the face and I said, you know what? I just wanted to know how my body was working. it works now. If it ends in a miscarriage, well then, okay, well, we can take that next step. But
Right.
it wasn't working.
Right.
We were doing all the things, but it wasn't, something wasn't
Right.
going. And yeah, he thought I was really crazy because
I
I was
feel
like,
like I've had that conversation with so many people where at the beginning of pregnancy, especially I had such a different story from getting pregnant on my own versus getting pregnant through surrogacy. Getting pregnant on my own, I would tell my close circle of friends because I figured if I was going to lose the baby, I wanted my close circle of friends to know and I wanted to be able to talk to them about it. Whereas with the surrogacy, everybody knew the whole process because I had to start with the medication and then I had to go in for IVF and then I had to take the pregnancy tests and I had to go in for the blood draws. And so from the moment I got pregnant, people knew the whole situation. And it was such a different feeling. And I felt almost more supported through surrogacy than I did through my own pregnancies, which is weird because I kept those babies. Like those are my children. And so the
mhm,
surrogate baby that I gave back to his own parents, I was like, all right, now you guys are thinking like, okay, where's the baby? You followed this whole
mhm,
progress and now the baby's back with his own family. Like that's such a
mhm,
weird way to look at it.
mhm, mhm. And it's so interesting you say that because I remember when I had first found out I was pregnant, I went to go visit my mother who had cancer, and I, shared with them, and her response was, "Oh, you really shouldn't be telling people because what if you lose it?" And I said, "Well, I would. That's why I want to tell people that I'm
Right.
pregnant, is that because then I can tell them it's a little bit like almost backward pedaling, like, oh, by the way, I had a miscarriage
Right. And
or
then you're
something
like, well, I
like
didn't even
that.
know you were pregnant. Well,
Yes,
yeah, because
exactly.
everybody tells me not to tell anybody.
Yes, and that's another phenomena that is so amazing of the way others react depending on how far along you were with the
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy. If you get, you find out you're pregnant and then you miscarry at 4 weeks, it's kind of like, oh, well, don't worry, you can get pregnant quickly. If it, farther along, and then like I have a friend who had a miscarriage. Well, she lost the baby at 5 months, which is a miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next baby she lost at 4 weeks, and she said the support was completely different.
Mm-hmm.
At 5 months, people were bringing in food and asking how they could watch the other kids, and at the 4 week baby that they lost, it was kind of like, well,
Right.
you can get another one. And it's like, no, a child is a child and a
Right.
mother is a mother.
Right.
And
That's
that's
I
that's
went through a therapy group when it first happened, and there was a whole bunch of us that we still sometimes chat with each other on text. But there was a few people that had ectopic pregnancies, and then there was a few people who had had a stillbirth, and I was in the middle. And
mm-hmm,
I remember feeling very like naive about the fact that because I had never had a miscarriage at any time. So I kept
mm-hmm,
thinking, number one, I'm the surrogate. People aren't going to care as much because it wasn't even my baby. And number
right.
two, it wasn't a stillbirth. So again, it's like how could somebody even think that someone at 4 weeks would feel sadness over losing a baby? And then when I saw how devastated some of the women were, I was like, how could I have thought that? I'm sitting here thinking people aren't even going to think that I should be sad because it's not my baby. And yet I'm thinking the same thing about them because the baby was a little bit younger gestationally. That's not fair on my part either.
Right, right. And that is part of that whole society, and which is again why it's so amazing that you're having this podcast and we can talk about this, because as I mentioned to you, some of the things that come up during perimenopause are as you're ending your fertility, you're kind of looking back and you're kind of regretting. And like I have a friend who told me that her grandmother shared with her on her deathbed that she'd had 3 miscarriages that nobody knew about, but it
Wow.
wasn't ever talked about, right?
Right.
Like you didn't talk about that in the 40s and the 50s. You just,
Right.
and actually looking at my own mother's health and the problems of that happened to her. She died when I was 5, and I'm thinking, I think she had a miscarriage. I think she had postpartum.
Hmm.
She was really, she was on antidepressants,
Hmm.
And she, and there she had a lot of stuff. And the stories that I hear about her in the last years of her life, I'm just now understanding, and I'm just sitting here wanting to scream. Did you not know that she was crying out for help
Hmm.
and nobody could serve her?
Right. And the more we
You know?
talk about it, the more it opens up those conversations. And it also opens up, number one, that feeling of feeling not alone. And number
Mhm.
two, feeling like you're not as crazy as you think.
Yes, that is the other thing, is that truly is the thing is, like, again, like you said, like, how do I manage these emotions
Hmm.
and how do I process this event that nobody ever shared with me that was a possibility?
Right.
And who do I go to talk about it? It's similar to, like, infertility, which, like, that's a whole nother realm. But when you're getting married and your friends are all having babies and you're not,
Right.
it's less of a conversation that you can share with them, and where do you find your tribe? Where do you
Right.
find your red tent to talk about this?
Right.
And so, again, I think you're just doing such a fantastic job. I'm so proud of you, and I'm
Thank
so happy
you.
that we connected. I think you're going to really open up the floodgates and start people having conversations. I really look forward to hearing any kind of feedback and things about, like, yeah, I had a miscarriage and process. And so that's actually one of the things that I would like to recommend to your viewers,
Yeah.
your listeners, as you're hearing this. One of the things as a Catholic mindset coach, I teach people is, like, write write the story,
Hmm.
journal on the story, and find the good, but also find the pain
Hmm.
and sit with it, because um we know that our body, and only the body, it makes visible what is invisible, both human and divine.
Hmm.
And so the pain is in our bodies and it manifests it elsewhere.
Right.
And until we can allow that pain to be acknowledged
Hmm.
and be almost loved through, then it can dissipate and it can come into good. And that's really kind of what I went through. And here I am now, a fertility instructor and a mindset coach, and just helping other women. That's my job. Is I want to help other women in their own womanhood and become the most beautiful gifts that they're called to be. But that pain is also that beauty, those beautiful cracks of a picture.
Hmm.
It's not how would I say this? There's the more it's like, almost like, the more wounds we can expose, the more beauty also comes through.
100%. That's actually why my symbol is the heart with all the gold cracks on it. Because of the fact that I had never been hypnotized before in my entire life. And this lady who I met right after the miscarriage said, I want to walk you through a hypnosis journey. And I was like, I'm up for anything at this point. Anything that's going to help me heal, I'm in. And I pictured towards the end this huge heart that had all of these cracks that were being filled with gold, like the Japanese do when they break a vase
Yes,
and they fill it with
yes.
gold to make it look more beautiful now that it's all put back together. And I think that's exactly what it is, where we all have trauma. We all come to the table with something. And I say it all the time. The only thing you can change is your outlook on it, because you can't change what happened. And so if you
Right.
can take those cracks in your heart and you can turn them into something beautiful, then you offer the world so much more.
Hmm. Oh, so true. Oh my goodness, that you just spoke truth, girlfriend. You just, like, boom, mic drop there.
Thanks.
Yeah, that is, yeah, no, and that's exactly what I was trying to verbalize. That was
Right.
the image that I was actually verbalizing. So we're, like, right connected here.
Totally. Right there.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Well,
and that's part of it. Yeah, it's
right.
gorgeous.
Right. And I love how you transitioned from this idea that not only do you have five children and one in heaven, but you've become this really great mentor and coach to other women who are going through their own fertility journeys, who are going through their own stories of not just fertility, but now perimenopause and menopause, and understanding that just because this is happening doesn't define who you are, and you can still work through all of those things that have happened.
And come out stronger and more beautiful. That's
Right.
that's where I'm at. I mean, I just celebrated my 60th birthday, and
Happy
I
birthday.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually almost 61. I'm closer to 61 than but this year has been my 60th, and I really just embraced who I am,
Hmm.
and I'm full of life. I'm healthier and happier than I was. And I was just talking to my co-host about this. I was like, oh my goodness, that's probably what was happening with me when all that stuff was happening. I was probably going through perimenopause.
Right.
And she's like, yeah, well, that makes sense. I was like, I never connected those dots of all of the things that happened in my life about, 15 years ago,
Hmm.
until I realized, oh yeah, okay, now I can see it, but because again, we don't talk about
Right.
perimenopause. I wasn't
Right.
having hot flashes. I wasn't having night sweats. Those are the only two things that we talk about
Right.
with perimenopause. And there's so much more.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's just been beautiful. And I just want to walk with every woman has a gift. Every woman is so beautiful because they're women,
Hmm.
because they're cycles.
Hmm.
And every woman has a reason that is that they are here on purpose on this earth to serve the world, to make it a better place. And
Right.
you are doing that, Kalila. I'm so
Thank
proud of
you.
you. I just really want to pour into you. This is just phenomenal. This is really
Thank you. That
phenomenal.
really means a lot. It's something where, like I said before, it's not an easy conversation, and it really is my honor every time I get to talk to somebody who is willing to share, because we each have our own story and they're all important. And it really, like, that feeling of not being alone is really what I want to capture, because it's it shouldn't feel lonely. It should feel like a big community. And I think I'm gonna have to read the Red Tent now, because I think that I've put it off and I put it off, and this year my second person that said you have to read it. So with that
And
bearing in mind of community, I think I'm gonna dive in.
yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective, just because of your origin and your thoughts and everything. So I just I just love it. I haven't read it for a number of years, but just the thought of that community of womanhood,
Hmm.
birthing, menstruation, breastfeeding. I mean,
Hmm.
those are things that, man, I'm sorry, man, but you cannot talk about this.
Nope.
You cannot talk about birthing because you will never birth.
Nope.
And there's power in the birthing. And even really going back to my own miscarriage, I think it was one of maybe the reasons why I chose not to go to the hospital to get a
Mm.
DNC, is because I had had all natural births previously. So I'd had 4 children.
Mm.
I knew the power, and I did feel, I don't want to say more powerful, but I think it helped me process, and it wasn't as devastating. It
Mm.
wasn't as non-functional, which can happen when people don't know how to process this miscarriage,
Right.
and when people, so I was very fortunate in the timing of the miscarriage. If I'd had a miscarriage during the infertility stages, would I've had that? I don't, but I knew that God was with me. Like I said, blessed, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, blessed be the name of the Lord. And it was actually funny because the next week we went to mass, and there's a song that they were singing, and the last part is, he gives and takes away, blessed be the name. And I was like, okay, Lord, thank you. Okay. I was just
Right.
like,
I
all
hear the
right, this is,
message loud and
I hear,
clear.
yeah, absolutely. And so I just, it was an act of trust, and it was act of I don't know. I don't know why bad things happen to good people.
Right.
I know that we have a good God. I know we have a creator that has created all this goodness, and yet there is evil in the world.
Right.
And there's sadness and death.
Right.
So
The only way I can reconcile it in my head is that we wouldn't know happiness if we didn't know sadness. And I think that I tell my kids all the time, like, yeah, if you're having a bad day, I get it. There, bad things happen. And your bad day is different than my bad day, and that's okay. It-
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. It's hard to wrap your head around.
It's the contrast, right? Like for instance, I live in El Paso and we had just this glorious 65-degree weather,
Mhm.
you know, and I'm thinking, wow, spring is coming. And my friend in Pennsylvania had snow, you know, and but yet I miss the snow because we don't, I mean, we have, probably, I mean, we're called the Sun City because we have, I don't, over, 300 days of sunshine, but sometimes, so we love the rain when we get it,
Right.
or the few specks of snow that we get.
Right. You look at it totally differently.
Yeah, whereas somebody's like, oh my, so yeah, and the contrast, right? The
Right.
contrast of, so yeah, this has been a beautiful conversation.
It really
I'm
has
really
been.
glad. Yeah, and we're gonna have to stay connected and
For
all
sure.
this.
I'm gonna have to find you on Facebook, which is the perfect segue. So tell everybody where they can find you.
So I have my own podcast. It's called Cycles and Sanctity. It's how a woman can use her cycle towards holiness. And then I'm on Instagram, Mama Jane 25, Jane Snyder 25 on Facebook. Those are the only two social media, because remember, I'm the old woman of the village.
I think two is great. My parents can barely handle one, so and they're a little bit older.
Sometimes I surprise myself at how much I do know. I'll be like, somebody will be saying, "I'm like, oh yeah, I signed up for that years ago," and they're like, "What? You already know about this?" I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. So, and then I also have my website, Wisdom Wellness Coaching, and someone can reach out to me if they. Right now, I'm really doing one-on-one coaching. I
Mm,
really love the intimacy, but we do it on Zoom. So wherever someone's listening to me, they can reach out. And yeah, I'm just here. I'm just Mama Jane
I love it. And my
doing my
last
thing.
question for you is that you've given such great pieces of advice in terms of really journaling through the bad stuff, remembering what happened and remembering how far you've come. What is a last piece of advice that you would give to somebody either who had had a miscarriage or a pregnancy loss or who is coming into the perimenopause phase that can sort of reconcile those?
Well, my first, now remember, I lead with my Catholic perspective of
Hmm.
the worldview. I always recommend, if someone hasn't named their child, to have a little bit of a celebration or a rite in naming that child or
Hmm.
children. Um, that gives great peace and connection. Um, and as far as like menopause, really just acknowledging the fact that this is a natural process of our bodies.
Hmm.
Loving yourself, learning to love yourself through the process.
Hmm.
Um, that's really the best advice. Sometimes we're our own worst enemies, right?
Yeah,
Like what we say to ourselves in our brain, if we said to our best friend or our husband, we would like not have any friends,
I,
right?
I say that all the time. Yep.
Yeah, it's just a woman's, I don't know. Thank you, Eve. That's what I'm always saying.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that those are two great pieces of advice, even for someone not going through menopause, just to love yourself through it all, because loving yourself through pregnancy or through pregnancy loss or through whatever you're going through is really difficult sometimes. So being able to look at yourself in the
Mhm.
mirror and shut out the negative voices is so important.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that was really what helped. I think that's what that priest did for me when I felt so guilty that I'm like, oh my goodness, I threw my baby away. Like I threw her, no, I didn't just throw her away, I threw her in the toilet. Like
Right.
she went down, and he really helped me calm myself down and give myself the grace, like love myself for that.
Right.
And was like, you made the best decision in the moment.
Right. Which is all you
Yeah.
can do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I so appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for sharing and for talking with me. I hope that my listeners get as much out of it as I did. I'm definitely going to find you on Facebook and follow you.
Well, thank you. And I can't, yeah, we're going to have to connect and, reread. Actually, maybe that'll be the next book. I tend to read a novel in the evening before I go to bed. So
Mm,
I'm almost finished with my, maybe I'll go get that book again. Because I think I've given like so many books away because I just love that book. I just think
yeah.
it's so important, you know?
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm
anyway,
going to
but
go
thank
find it
you.
at the library.
All right. Well, you take care. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on your podcast. And again, you're doing great things. You
Thank
really
you. It
are
was
doing great
truly my
things.
honor to have you. Thank you for joining me today on Pushing Through Loss. I hope this episode has provided support, understanding, and a sense of community. Remember, you are not alone on your journey, and you have the strength to face the challenges that come your way. If you found value in today's conversation, please leave me a review and consider sharing it with others who may benefit. Together, we can help each other heal and activate our inner strength warriors. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations, and until next time, you got this.